Hi everyone, welcome to our week 6 online module focusing on communicable diseases and antimicrobial resistance. I'm going to start us off with an article that's one of your supplemental reading articles, and it focuses on the era of globalization and global change and how that's had a big impact on the differences in our infectious diseases. So, we've seen a lot in the 21st century with respect to severe infectious disease outbreaks, from SARS to swine flu, MERS, Ebola, Zika, COVID 19, and recently Mpox. And these severe infectious diseases seem to coexist with our changes in technology, demographics, and our climate change. So, all related to globalization. And so, this article reviews how these changes have altered infectious disease risk. So, if we look a little bit historical, we know that the spread of disease during pre modern times was through colonialization, slavery, and war. And so, the movement of people for those reasons. And the impacts of disease were such things as tuberculosis, polio, and smallpox. And they were the big diseases that we saw before modern vaccines. And we saw a lot of high death rates with these three diseases. But we've seen reductions in mortality due to medical advances, better access to care, and good sanitation. The three ongoing challenges are the persistent challenges in low middle income countries or the global south, with their neglected tropical diseases, with the top three communicable diseases being HIV, TB, and malaria. Secondly, is the outbreaks of emerging, so new infectious diseases or re-emerging pathogens that had gone quiet and re-emerged. And these two are all aided by our global connectivity and the shifting ranges of vectors, which we'll speak to because of climate change. Let's look at this slide. This is emerging and re-emerging pathogens. And so if you look at the examples of emerging diseases, these are new diseases. So SARS-CoV-2 is our COVID-19, Ebola, Zika. So you see if these are emerging, and they typically start with emergence in a local setting, but they tend to move or will move on beyond borders and cause a global scale spread. So they typically start with popping up in a local situation, a local context, and then because of movement amongst borders, we have this global scale spread. The impact of global connectivity and climate change all impact these emerging threats. And then we have the re-emerging diseases, the ones that have been quiet and re-emerged for some reason. The global changes affecting disease risk are four, and we're going to speak to these four: climate change, urbanization and population growth, increased global trade and travel, and technological advances. So, first of all, climate change and disease risk. So, the key points here are because of changing environmental conditions, it alters the vector or the species range and density, meaning a mosquito that would typically cause malaria in one area now can, because of climate change and warmer weathers, increase their migration patterns because the world is becoming warmer. And so no longer do they just stay in one area that was typically a very warm country or a very warm area in the world. Now they're migrating to other areas. They're also migrating to other areas because of droughts and our increased precipitation. Secondly, climate change makes us more susceptible to respiratory viral infections because of poor air pollution. And so they're impacted by our local exposure to air pollution now. So we see actually a lot more viral infections, especially in the summer months because of our local air pollution and our air quality index. Then we think about the sea levels and the sea temperatures. And so elevated sea temperatures lead to increased production of the cholera pathogen in areas with already poor water and sanitation. So the areas they had poor water and sanitation to begin with, and then you have the elevated sea temperatures because of climate change. As well as floods and hurricanes infect other areas. So an area that maybe was cholera free is impacted by a flood or a hurricane, and that infects those waters with cholera. Moving on to urbanization and population growth. Population growth is the increased population density and its correlation with disease transmission. So we know urban centers are hubs for transmission. And we know the aging population also increases transmission because they're living longer, but they have an increased susceptibility of elderly to infectious agents. We have more elderly patients or population. They are increased susceptible to infectious, and so they become carriers. And they're a large growing population, and they're carrying these infectious diseases. Increased global trade and travel. We've talked about this a lot. The impact of international travel, so the global spread that way. Human migration, we've talked about. It's driven by socioeconomic, political, and environmental factors, temporary migration patterns, and then the international trade of plants, animals, animal products that carry disease or bring disease with them. And then we've got our technological changes. Because of technology, we've been able to make air travel very affordable. So it's lowered the cost of air travel. It's heightened the demand for inexpensive flights. People fly all over the world now. And so advances in global trade and travel has increased the spread of infectious diseases. And then if we think about technology and healthcare, that double-edged sword of mitigating and exacerbating disease spread. So we have more advanced techniques, so people are living longer. And so we spoke on the previous page about carriers of infectious diseases of our older population. But because people are living longer, we tend to be using a lot more antibiotics. And so the role of antibiotics and the rise of antimicrobial resistance. So the conclusion from this article is that we're in an era of increased infectious disease risk. There's multifaceted drivers requiring an interdisciplinary approach, and one approach is the collaborative perspective of One Health, so environmental health, human health, and animal health. And it's really important that we think about our infectious diseases from a global perspective and the importance of collaboration.